Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies recorded in the late after-work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Emilio.
I'm Madeline.
And I'm Julian. The three of us are colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Yes, music is what brings us together, but movies are what keep us together, talking at the end of the night. So we've created some order to this ongoing trend by recording these conversations, considering an overarching theme while we cycle through 5 unique guidelines for engagement.
In addition to these main episodes, we record and release bonus one-off episodes as we see fit, and we plan to do more of that in the coming months. While we do this, you, the listener, can count on the three of us doing what we've grown to love, foregoing sleep for a discussion about movies every other week.
And this week, we continue our current cycle of movies related to high school with a category called Suggestion Box, which this is our second Suggestion Box episode, where one of us elects a film for the group to discuss. At least one of us will be seeing this movie for the very first time, and differing opinions may or may not be held among us. The movie that we're going to talk about today is a movie that is truly near and dear to my heart. It is 1989's Heathers, directed by Michael Lehman, written by Dan Waters, starring Winona Ryder and Christian Slater, amongst others.
Yeah, the seminal high school black comedy.
Definitely. Yeah, and we'll get into why this movie ran my life for a number of years shortly. But I think it is important to note that you're going to be looking up this movie and typing it into a search bar and stopped after the first 4 letters. You might get this movie confused with the movie Heat, which is the Michael Mann 1995 cop crime epic. Very, very different movie, although kind of violent in their own way.
Yeah. I guess, if you're going to draw any similarities, it would be that.
Yeah.
In the category of movies lacking a the, but still having plural titles, this is not to be confused with Devs, the Alex Garland miniseries from 2020, which I still haven't seen, but it's supposed to be good. Alex Garland is about to release, as of this recording, a new movie, Civil War, so I've been thinking of watching Devs to catch up.
Not a bad reason to.
Yeah.
Heathers is also not to be confused with, and I think there are several reasons why this could be confusing, not to be confused with The Veronicas,
Yes,
which is an Australian pop duo from the earlier 2000s, and could be especially confusing because Veronica is the main character of this movie and not a person named Heather.
Yes, and my understanding is that band got the name of their band because of the movie Heathers.
I imagine so.
That's true.
Yeah, I believe I had a few songs by the Veronicas on my iPod Nano, although I don't know that I would be able to recall any specifically.
Yeah.
Got it. The use of the color red in the movie that we're talking about today might make you think that you're watching the movie Red Heat, which is a 1988 action comedy buddy cop movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jim Belushi. Belushi, I should say. Alas, this is not that movie.
No, instead we are talking about 1989's Heathers, as we've already mentioned.
What's Heathers about?
Heathers.
What goes on in Heathers? I'm curious. As somebody who's seen this movie countless times.
Yeah, so I am the other member of this trio who has seen the movie before. I'll do my best to summarize it now. So Veronica Sawyer is a student at Westerberg High School in Sherwood, Ohio, and she decides that she has had enough of the petty social antics of her bratty friend group, all of whom, other than her, are named Heather. She is simultaneously enticed by fellow student J.D. and his penchant for the dangerous, and the two embark on a series of efforts to shake things up and sabotage the reputations and truly the entire lives of certain Heathers and other peers in their run-of-the-mill middle American high school.
Yeah, that's the setup for this.
Yeah, that's pretty much the setup. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I find most interesting about this movie is kind of the reaction of the school and the community to all of the death that's happening, and particularly the first Heather's death after it's framed as a suicide, and how everybody in the school suddenly wants to be connected to this in some way and wants to kind of cash in on this and say, like, people that didn't didn't even like her are suddenly like, oh, I looked forward to seeing her in math class and things
Right,
like that.
right.
I think that is something that really gets to Veronica. That
Right.
I think that's a motivator for other things that she does and behavior she's willing to accept from JD because she's so disgusted
Right.
by
Absolutely.
everybody else.
Yeah.
yeah.
I watched the DVD commentary in preparation for this. Thank you, Emilio, for lending that DVD,
Of
by
course,
the way.
of course.
And you see one of the Heathers, Heather Duke, carrying around a copy of Moby Dick throughout the movie, but it was not meant to be that book. It was meant to be The Catcher in the Rye.
I
Yeah.
love that detail.
Which fits because Holden Caulfield, for those who have read the book, you'll know this, that Holden Caulfield is obsessed with calling out all the phonies in the world.
Right.
And it seems very much like Veronica Sawyer wants to do that too.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I also love that detail because I do feel like it oddly gives the Heather Duke character a little bit of depth, considering her association with the Heathers.
Yeah, and her like eventual arc. Like I think at the very beginning, I haven't said on mic yet. I was the one that hadn't seen this movie.
Oh, that's
before.
right. That's right. You hadn't seen this movie before.
So
yeah.
I've now watched it twice in the last week.
Okay.
Humble brag. But I mean, we'll get into impressions, I think, here in a bit, but I loved it. I'm so glad to have finally been initiated. So thank you. But at the very beginning, I'm like, oh, she's the bookworm one. I like her. It's like they kind of, Heather Duke has a really interesting arc in this because she's kind of like the punching bag Heather. Like
She is. She starts off being the punching bag.
exactly.
100%.
And then she has to kind of find a way with, being pushed along by other forces of taking some power throughout the movie.
Yeah, she reveals herself to be quite a social climber.
Right, definitely. And
Yeah.
even from the very beginning, she seems like she's bothered by the fact that she's sort of under the thumb of,
Yeah.
of the queen bee and is excited at the opportunity to maybe step into her place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To continue about our initial impressions of the movie. So I had seen this before around, I know you're going to want this level of precision, Madeline, so I'm going to go right into it.
I wanted to.
Around 5.5 years ago, late August 2018, the week before the beginning of my senior year of college.
Good time to watch this movie, I think.
Yeah, in college, ironically. But really, the purpose was quite simple. There was no agenda for me in watching this other than I have this, this is my last week before I get really busy. I'm going to just watch a bunch of Netflix in this time. Heather's was on it at that period in time. And I knew this is supposed to be a great movie. Why wait any longer? Let's see it. And I did, and I loved it the first time as well as the second. And I think that I had much better attention to detail with this second viewing. But it really stuck with me the first time, too. I think it did shock me the way that it is meant to shock. It's such an escalation watching it that
Really
I think,
is.
I knew some things about it going in, just that it was like there was death and that it was a dark comedy about high school. But like when I really made it to the end of that movie, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I really was impressed. I was blown away, to put it appropriately, about that. And here we are again. Still love it. It's still a great movie. And I mean, for you, Emilio, I mean, this is one that you were like very, very passionate about talking about.
I mean, I joked last time we got on the mics that this is the only reason I initiated a conversation about, hey, maybe we should record these. I don't know.
Yeah.
I absolutely love this movie. I saw this movie back in the summer of 2004. That was the summer between my sophomore and junior year of high school. Heathers came on my radar because earlier that spring, a very popular high school movie had just come out called Mean Girls, which was an instant classic in the moment. Like a lot of people my age, I saw it and I liked it. And I had read a review of it that compared it favorably to a movie called Heathers, a movie that at that time I knew nothing about. God bless the fact that I worked at a video store. Shout out to Village Video on 105th and Western in Chicago, because I was able to scratch almost any film-related itch that I had. We had 2 copies of it on VHS. I took one of them home. I remember seeing it with a few friends. And I think we might have been watching bits of one of those John Landis comedy sketch movies. Do you guys know Kentucky Fried Movie or Amazon Women on the Moon?
No.
Not really, no.
Okay.
Not substantively.
I can't remember which one, honestly, because my life literally changed the night that I watched Heathers. And that sounds hyperbolic. I can assure you that it wasn't. Did you guys watch a movie in high school, maybe that in retrospect, you look back and you're like, wow, high school was just a perfect time to see this movie?
As I think about that question, funny enough, the two things that feel most appropriate as responses to that are movies that we are also discussing in this same cycle.
Oh, cool.
The first is Dazed and Confused, which we've already talked about, which
Right
I
on.
think I first saw in pieces when I was around 17.
Yeah.
And I said in that conversation too, like, no, that doesn't look that much like my life. I did not grow up outside of Austin in 1976. But, just the emotions that showed in that movie, I think, as I said in that conversation, the way it depicts the release of energy that you have pent up by high school.
Yeah.
Along with the fact that it just has this excellently curated soundtrack, and that really scratched the nerd itch for me at the time.
Wonderful.
I latched onto that movie very easily and confidently. But then another one that I saw a little earlier on that felt right for that age was Superbad.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not a completely relatable movie for me. I can't say I've really lived the circumstance that happens in that movie, but its portrayal of the awkwardness of high school, I found that very relatable.
Awesome.
And I saw that movie for the first time when I was 15, and I thought, well, yeah, it's kind of the perfect age to see it.
Yeah, I'd say so. How about you, Madeline?
I think when I was kind of trying to go through this question in my mind, I think the movie that I came to is Juno.
Oh.
I mean, that's a lovely movie that I still hold really near and dear to my heart. Our boss asked me my favorite movie once about 5 years ago, and I suddenly forgot every movie I had ever seen in my life. And I told him my favorite movie was Juno, which is not really something that I stick by at all.
It's funny though. Sometimes that can be a very clarifying moment.
Yeah, exactly. You're like,
it was the
maybe
one.
my favorite movie is Juno.
Right.
I am going to take that back if our boss is listening. But it's a movie that clearly affected me enough that, over a decade later, somebody asked me my favorite movie, and it's the only one I can think of. I think that I just really connected with Elliot Page's performance in that film. You were mentioning Superbad, so we've got the Michael Cera connection there in both of
That's right. I think they both came out the same year,
They
too.
did.
Yeah.
2007?
And I probably saw Juno when it came out. I don't have as strong of a memory for
you didn't
exact
see it
dates as you
14 years or 17 years and 8 months ago or something?
Yeah.
But you brought up Juno. I brought up Superbad. Well, que sera, sera.
Whatever shall be, shall be.
And Michael Cera.
That's right.
So,
Oh my gosh! See, you hit me with these sometimes. I take. Yeah, I
You're
always
a
think of that.
thinker.
I think of that line in Raising Arizona where he's like, "That's a homer," because you get it
yeah.
on the way home. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So Juno was.
yeah,
a big
I think
one for you.
Juno is it for me, and I think it's. I think the performances in that movie are really excellent. But I just really connected with the soundtrack in that movie. I thought the Moldy Peaches. I think have some real banger seems like the wrong word, but some just real
lo-fi bangers.
Lo-fi, just enjoyable. Yeah, that's gonna be my answer.
Cool. Well, my answer is Heather's. That movie absolutely entranced me. I mean, it was funny, it was profane, it was subversive. It had a great script, still has a great script, that hit so hard the first time I watched it. And I remember too, the performances were kind of unusual, but I felt like they were so perfect for what the movie was trying to do. And it succeeded in doing something that I'd never felt a movie do before, which was be really funny, but also dead serious at the same time. And we'll get into this a little bit more later, but the post-Columbine era in which I saw this movie heavily impacted my early response to it. But yeah, man, I mean, this movie was, to use a term that we've talked about before favorably, it's a big swing of a movie, and it totally worked on me. I knew right away I had just seen my favorite movie. And that we're gonna come back to that later. But in that moment, I was like, I just saw my favorite movie, and I actually was like, maybe this is the best movie that I'd ever seen. It was the best movie ever made. It felt that way in the moment. But I immediately became part of the Heather's cult. I turned my buddies at the video store onto it. It became my favorite movie to talk up to video store patrons. I'm very proud to say that rentals of Heather's increased by over 400% at our store after I started talking about it. I screened it for my friends. My girlfriend in high school, bless her heart, still chose to date me after I passionately subjected her to this. I was absolutely buzzed watching, thinking about, talking about Heather's. And to this day, it's the movie that I've thought about the most. It's definitely the movie that I've seen the most, at least as more of a grown person. And the movie that I think most typifies how I've grown to make space for movies in my life. I know for certain that something about me today would be meaningfully different if I hadn't seen Heathers that summer.
Wow.
I clearly have a lot to say about this movie, but I loved this movie when I saw it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. And yeah, I alluded to it a little bit before, but I saw this movie about 4 years after Columbine, and I feel like this movie has such a different feel. I think after an incident like Columbine grew to sort of typify that type of school violence. And so while I felt this movie was very funny and I loved the characters, I felt like this was a movie that had a lot on its mind.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that a little more. But
Very prescient, as you put it, in a question that we're going to get into.
yeah, for
I
sure.
mean,
Yeah.
I would love to just, I guess, expand on that slightly. Just like, I mean, I'm sure that all of us had those experiences in high school where there was some sort of like possible danger at your school. Like, I feel like a lot of schools had this, and schools are more and more often having this where they're going into some kind of lockdown or something. But I remember I think it was my freshman year of high school, there was like nothing happened, but it was one of those things where I think it got started just through like text messaging and maybe some kind of, this was early days of social media kind of gossip, where it was like, oh, there's going to be like a bomb or like a gang or something that's going to like happen at the school. And it was kind of insane. Like pretty much everybody went home from school that day. People started talking about it in first period, and by second period, it's like nobody was getting anything done. Just the panic and like anxiety, like as soon as that's even inserted as a possibility, the group think of everybody freaking out about like, well, what if? Just like really completely spiraled out of control. And I mean, of my 1,000-person high school, supposedly there were like 50 kids left at the end of the day because everybody went. They didn't officially call off school, but everybody was calling their parents. Everybody was just leaving.
Yeah.
I was so scared. I lived across the street from my high school. So I was like, well, I'm not safe here either.
I was going to say, you wouldn't feel safe there either. Yeah.
Yeah, I went home and I was like hiding behind, like in my brother's bedroom, like under his bed. I was like, this is not any safer than across the street if there's a bomb. So I think we went to like Applebee's or something, and we're well, we'll be safe here at the Applebee's.
Yeah. I got that.
Maybe there's something I'm not remembering right now. I'm not remembering any circumstance that I've lived through that really looks a lot like that. But I think part of why Heathers hits too is that the dangers in it are not, or just like really a lot of the circumstances are not confined to high school. There's just broader like real world dangers and philosophies that are present in this movie.
Absolutely.
That, I think speak to a lot, not just about high school, but about society. JD has that quote near the end of that movie. Seriously, people are going to look at the ashes of Westerberg and say, now there's a school that self-destructed, not because society didn't care, but because it was society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty deep, right?
Pretty deep. Actually,
I'm gonna get to that.
Just to draw I thought of some connections between Heathers and some other, well-known movies that are not high school movies, because of things like that. And just as a result, I'm going to make one of those connections by reading that same quote in a different tone of voice.
Ooh.
Seriously. People are going to look at the ashes of Westerberg and say, now there is a school that self-destructed. Not because society didn't care, but because it was society.
That's actually pretty good.
Very
I'm going to
impressive.
guess that that's 10 Things I Hate About You right now.
Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there we go.
Of
Yeah.
course.
No, the other iconic Heath Ledger performance,
Yes.
right? Yeah. I can see that.
I was thinking about The Dark Knight watching Heathers. I mean, like
Sure.
the dueling philosophies between Veronica and JD made me think a lot of Batman and the Joker. Because, especially, maybe the Joker comparison's a little bit, there's a little more to that
Right.
with JD, but I think, at least in Veronica's case, Batman's not entirely this moral figure completely, but, he just stands for this kind of service, and he's going to save Gotham City in a way that the Joker will not. Maybe this is all to say that Veronica Sawyer is not the hero that Westerberg High School needs, but the one it deserves.
I like that. I like that comparison. This is why I'm excited to talk
Yeah.
about this. That didn't even cross my mind at all.
Well, it did cross mine.
Lovely,
Really?
very cool.
Yeah.
I would agree. What you just spoke to, Madeline, was something that this movie actually kind of unlocked in me. I didn't have a moment quite like that But I think just being a young person in high school in the early 2000s, it was something that you just lived with.
Yeah.
I went to a really nice high school generally. I did see some bullying that was very troubling. And there were some kids in our school who I think there were moments, I think, where people were like, is this person okay? I don't think anybody truly thought something bad was going to happen. But this movie, in watching it, unlocked all of the emotion that I felt like I had, that like I had been conditioned to think that there might be a threat of violence at my school too.
Yeah.
It kind of let me, almost as a form of catharsis, be like, that's right. Like I've been told that this could happen at any moment, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, I am not the youngest here, but because I was working in, middle schools until like 2018, I've been in a school environment fairly recently. And that's still very pervasive. And
Absolutely.
like I was teaching middle school at the time of the Parkland shooting. And, I had kids come up to me and were like, do you think you should have a gun? And like, 12-year-olds asking for this. The threat has evolved in a lot of ways, but it's still very present.
Right.
Now that I think about it, it's maybe not in high school, but I feel like in college I had more of that concern, especially because like I went to Sarah Lawrence College, and I mean, well, this is a particularly hot button school when it comes to safety, because for people who are not familiar with the school, other than in surface level ways, one of the first things that is known by most people about the school as of about 5 years ago and since is that there's a very well-known story about a cult that stemmed from a house at the Sarah Lawrence campus. It's not the same kind of danger. It's not the same form of danger as we see in Heathers, but it's still like a very dangerous thing happening right under the school's nose.
Right.
And there were issues of how the school responded to it. And this news broke out right before I was graduating. And so I was first I thought like, well, pretty good time to graduate, isn't it? But
Sure.
Get out while you can.
Get out while you can. Jordan Peele, who directed Get Out, went to Sarah Lawrence too. I thought of Get Out a few times during Heathers, not because of thematic similarities, but because of aesthetic things.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like all those scenes, like on the that patio.
Oh, yeah.
I just had to think of Get Out during those. But yeah, during college, I think I had a little more of that concern, even without that news, just because like Sarah Lawrence has a very kind of open, not well guarded campus.
Gotcha.
There was an issue there when I was a freshman where like someone, like a criminal who was on the run in a surrounding neighborhood, had allegedly like fled onto the campus, and we all had to lock down.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is, whether it's high school or whether it's middle school or whether it's college, unfortunately, we live in an age now where there is kind of a threat of something potentially very violent happening in schools, which is a total shame. But again, I mean, something that this movie just had its finger on the pulse of way before I think it was, something that people were talking about in the media more. I wanted to ask you guys really quick. I mean, we've talked a little bit about our own experiences in high school, but was there anything about this movie's, I'm going to say, deeply cynical characterization of high school, like the cliques or the bullying or out of touch faculty? Did any of that speak at all to your own time in high school?
When I think about the time that I was in high school, my first thought when I read that question, when you sent it to us, was not really, because when it comes to like, the lack of emotionality that the parents and some adults have, I thought, well, that kind of didn't speak to my time. And my first thought there was that I was in high school as a bunch of very public police killings happened, and the response was not to be apathetic. There were like student walkouts to protest the verdicts regarding the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner, for instance. And there was just, a show of solidarity that I think that was more palpable to me. I didn't think, for all the problems of my high school experience, that's one thing where I actually was pretty proud of what I was seeing. Maybe more socially amongst peers, that was true of like people, I already used the term social climber, but people who are like just engaging in, kind of trying to climb the social hierarchy in petty ways and doing it insensitively to others. And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of ever present in high school, sadly.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I agree that when I read the question, I don't think that this necessarily feels all that true to my high school experience. There was definitely a popular quote unquote crowd at my high school. But I think kind of beyond that, there weren't necessarily a lot of like niche cliques. Like in Mean Girls where they're in the cafeteria and they're like, and here's this clique and here's this table. It's like that never felt true to my own high school experience. I kind of felt like outside of the more like popular crowd, everybody else was pretty intermingled. And, you know, there was a lot of like kind of crossing of the different social groups. So I didn't necessarily feel like this was true to my experience in those ways that you mentioned necessarily. But I do think like I did have friends, I think at the time where it occurred to me that like this person might not be in a like safe mental state and that like perhaps like they could resort to something like that or succumb to something like that. So luckily I didn't experience that with any of my friends, but I had friends who were like self-harming to the point that like it could have happened.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Similarly, I didn't feel like this was that cued into my high school experience either, to be really honest. I mean,
if it was, maybe you wouldn't have connected with it as deeply.
Right, exactly. I mean, and I think that because it created this kind of universe that felt so different from my own, it felt like it was this other world that I could kind of go to, or with characters that felt very fresh and different.
Yeah.
And so, as a result, I think I felt like I was able to engage with this movie more as kind of like somebody who was kind of jumping in almost like a tourist in some respects.
Yeah. A movie that we covered earlier in this cycle was Dazed and Confused. And I said at the time that felt much more closely paralleled to my own high school experience. And I stand by that after watching this movie. I definitely think that movie is closer to my own experience.
Yeah. And for me, that movie would be Fame of the ones that we've already covered.
I love that.
Yeah. I'm glad that I can say that for a bunch of reasons. But yeah, Fame, great movie.
Cool.
But I think that's actually a pretty good segue into a question that I posed for us, which is about the film's relationship to reality. The first line of the film is Veronica saying, "Dear Diary, Heather told me she teaches people about real life." And I think that what we see here is a very heightened version of high school. It's definitely not entirely realistic. In fact, I think a lot of the portrayals of the adults in particular are almost cartoonish, intentionally so.
Yeah.
I felt like a lot of the teenagers were a little closer to reality, a little more grounded.
Right. Like better written or more well-rounded, I should say.
I don't think that the more caricature characters are like poorly written. It's just that there's a clear intention to make them a little bit more cartoonish.
Yeah.
When I think of cartoonish characters in Heather's, for the first ones I think about are the cops.
Oh,
I love the cops. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you also think of the cops from Kids in the Hall?
Okay, see, I've seen that show in bits and pieces, not in a consistent run.
So there are recurring characters of like two kind of like dumb cops played by Bruce McCulloch and Mark McKinney on Kids in the Hall. They're in pretty much every episode. Like if you revisit any Kids in the Hall, you will catch them.
I'm due for a rewatch.
They are so similar to when we first meet these two cops and they're just like smoking in their car. This is a Kids in the Hall sketch.
Right, he goes like, oh, shit, let's roll.
Doesn't Kids in the Hall start the same year as Heather's?
Exactly. So I'm like, I don't know if like one influenced the other or if this was just a coincidence.
I think that's a really eerie coincidence.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking of like a John Waters type character
seeing
those two
definitely
as well. Where, like, you know, we've talked about John Waters. Everything is incredibly heightened in those movies.
Yeah.
Particularly in something like Polyester, where everyone is just a type from society. And I made a comparison there to like underground comics, the R. Crumb sort of thing. The intent of that material is to show things that exist in the real world, but just in an incredibly amplified form.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so even though it's silly to watch those cops, I mean, it's calling to like a real form of police inattention in the world, and also just adult apathy towards teenage crime, or if not just specifically crime, then
teenage
turmoil.
behavior or turmoil. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But so then I was just considering, like, how does this dynamic serve to represent and teach the viewer about reality?
I don't want to step on any of the points that you want to make on this, but I kind of want to answer your question by comparing it briefly, and I'll just say very little. I had not seen the movie Carrie when I saw Heather's the first time. Mm-hmm. I saw Carrie probably about maybe 5 years and 2 months and 6 days ago, something along those lines.
I still have not seen it, though I know quite a bit about it.
Yeah. But I saw this movie, and the first thing I thought of was, if I had seen this around the time I saw Heathers, that might have also been a movie that spoke very deeply to me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they operate on very similar levels.
Definitely.
And it's about a very heightened emotional experience to what goes on in high school, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think that Dan Waters was in some ways inspired some by Stephen King, I think, in the writing of the screenplay.
I can see that.
So I think that makes a lot of sense. The first time I watched it, I was like 15 and my parents put it on for some reason. And I think I've told the story on the pod, and I have since talked to my mom about this because I was like, why did you put this movie on? And she says that I kept saying, like, I want to watch a scary movie. I want to watch a scary movie. Put on a scary movie. I still hold steady to this was the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a scary movie, but it's like a deeply emotional film to watch. Yeah.
It also focuses a lot on like child abuse.
Yeah.
And I think that was the moment where I had her turn it off. Not to spoil too much, this is not very far into the movie. Again, I got maybe 15 minutes in this movie before I was like, turn it off. Yeah. But the mother like locks her in a closet
drags her
into a closet and locks her in there and is essentially like, repent. And that's as far as I can get in this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But I read the book a few years later, and then I rewatched the film in college, and it clicked for me so much more deeply. And I think it has a lot of these similar kind of this similar narrative in some ways. There's not necessarily a Carrie in Heathers. And I feel like the closest Carrie is Martha Dumstock.
Yes.
Is the closest
Yes.
Heathers gets to a Carrie. Like Veronica is not a Carrie type character.
And JD is not a Carrie either.
No.
Yeah.
I think in some ways JD maybe sees himself as persecuted in a similar way, but I disagree. I think maybe in some ways he's just bringing these things upon himself.
Sure.
Offspring of
as
the ruling
you
class.
sometimes do when you're a teenager.
When you're 16 or 17 or whatever. Whereas Carrie as a character is pretty innocent and is just like kind of at the mercy of these terrible bullies ruining her life. I mean, I dressed as Carrie for Halloween the year I saw the movie. Very easy Halloween costume. Just like fancy dress, fake blood. I made the fake blood myself and it was so sticky. It took me days to get out of my hair. So I do not necessarily recommend. You should probably use store-bought fake blood if you choose to do this costume.
Cool.
Wow.
Cool.
I was thinking of Stephen King quite a bit during Heathers just because of the portrayal of adult apathy.
Yeah.
Because like I haven't seen or read Carrie, but in It particular, there's like a very strong emphasis on adult apathy.
Yeah.
And that like part of the reason why Pennywise can do all of this stuff repeatedly is that the adults are not caring enough for the children.
Right. You wrote to me too, or that you thought of another movie that predates Heathers in much the same way that Carrie predated Heathers.
Yes. That is Terrence Malick's film Badlands.
Totally see and totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not a movie that's set in high school, but here's a connection: Sissy Spacek
To Carrie.
Yeah. Sissy Spacek plays a 15-year-old girl in that movie who becomes enamored with a 25-year-old man played by Martin Sheen, who quickly reveals himself to be a cold-blooded killer.
Yeah, a psychopath.
I'll try not to spoil Badlands for those who haven't seen it. I mean, that detail is basically premise. It's very near the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, first 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know that's going on.
But so Badlands is actually based on a true story on the murder spree of Charles Starkweather in the late 1950s. And though it's not set in a high school, I think there is a somewhat similar dynamic between the Sissy Spacek and Martin Sheen characters in that movie. Interesting connection is that part of the reason why Dan Waters named JD that is as a bit of a dark homage to James Dean,
right? Who is prominently
compared. The Martin Sheen character is prominently compared to in Badlands.
Yes, and loves it.
Yeah, he loves the celebrity of being a criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. Heathers is a very similar arc to Badlands in that, in a very Terrence Malick-esque way. Sissy Spacek's 15-year-old character is also the narrator of the film.
Yeah.
And so you're really seeing the movie through her eyes. And she is disillusioned more and more by what drew her to this 25-year-old guy.
Yeah.
And eventually she reaches a moment where she's like, am I going to make a stand or not?
Yeah.
And I think that these movies show these two female characters making a stand in very different ways, and they have to really start thinking about the consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's at some point after I saw the movie Badlands, which was about 4 years and a month and a half ago, but I remember reading about the movie at that time. I think there was some like review that I read maybe from the time it was released that said that the Sissy Spacek character was sympathetic, but maybe a bit of a sociopath.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in the way
I
that
think so,
she,
too.
goes along. I mean, she does take a stand or make an effort to, but she goes along for quite some time before she does that.
Yeah.
There are things that normally would turn any other person away that do not turn her away. And that was something I noticed about Veronica in this viewing of Heathers too.
I would definitely agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, totally.
From listening to the DVD commentary, that was definitely an intention on writer Dan Waters' his part, which was that in the original script, I mean, he really saw Veronica as like kind of this manipulative character.
Yeah.
And that Winona Ryder in her performance makes her so much more sympathetic to the viewer.
All right. I think we'll definitely make some time to talk about the main characters too, but
Yeah.
on the subject not of Terrence Malick films necessarily, but maybe more of high school movies, one of the things that really drew me to it was the fact that I felt like this movie was such an interesting amalgam of influences that came before it, but then it also was such an influential film for what came after. And so I sent everybody here a very incomplete list of
That's saying something. It's long.
right of high school movies that Heathers is in conversation with. You mentioned Badlands, Madeline, you were like, definitely Carrie. There's a movie that is often compared to this film, Heathers, I should say, which is a movie called Massacre at Central High. Have you guys heard of this movie?
Not until now.
Yeah,
honestly.
only from your list.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. I actually got around to seeing this movie for this conversation. It is a really interesting movie to watch after having had Heathers in my life for as long as I have. There are some really interesting comparisons. I don't think this is a particularly good movie, although I think the direction it takes is kind of interesting. It does create this Animal Farm type situation in high school where there's like mean boys, I guess, not mean girls, but mean boys that are like running the school. And some presence comes in and erases them. And suddenly all the downtrodden people want to misbehave too, which is something that Heathers also gets into, which is this idea that, there's always going to be somebody hungry for power.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Massacre at Central High, it's interesting. There's a lot of boobs in this movie, for sure, some very weird music, but the very end has a lot of similarities to Heathers.
Ooh.
Yes. So I do think that is a somewhat interesting movie to watch. If you're a mega fan of Heathers like I am, it's worth watching.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm interested that you mentioned Rock and Roll High School on your list too, because I have seen that movie many years ago, about close to 15 years ago.
Great.
Wow.
I know
Not 14 in like 9 months or something?
Actually, it's probably more like that.
Okay.
Yeah, to be quite honest. But yeah, that's a movie. I mean, I think my memory of it is basically just, it's the Ramones movie. It's fun.
Yeah, that's all I know about
literally
it.
in the song, fun, fun, Rock and Roll High School.
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah, but it's a good point that the way to assert individuality and stick it to the man, as they put it in School of Rock, in Rock and Roll High School, is to blow the whole thing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, it's played for fun in that
It
movie.
definitely is played for fun.
Grease-like.
Yeah, a little more Grease-like, yeah.
It really feels like Heathers is kind of like, if Grease is one side of the coin, then Heathers is the other. And
Definitely.
it's really the underbelly of heightened high school experiences.
Grease did not really feel like high school to us.
Yeah.
It takes place in high school, and it's about this idea of high school, but it's not a high school that any of us really relate to.
Yeah, and there's also like the surface level fact that we talked about in our Grease episode, which is all these high schoolers are played by people in their 20s and 30s
Right.
even. And then I think they've spoken that it was very intentional that they cast mostly actual teenagers for Heathers, outside of what's her face that plays Heather McNamara that lied about
It's
her
like
age
23.
during
23,
her
yeah,
audition.
yeah.
It's still
but-
closer than a lot of the people. I think any of the
Oh,
people.
yeah,
in
I was
Grease.
going to say,
Yeah.
I think 23 would be on the very
That's the
early and youngest
of the
age.
Greasers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, Winona Ryder was 16, I think.
Yeah, I think she turned 16 during filming.
Yeah, and
right.
Christian Slater, I think, was just out of high school, like 18
Yeah,
or 19.
18 or
18
19.
going on 19 is what I have. Shannon Doherty was 16, about to turn 17. Kim Walker, who plays Heather Chandler, was 19 going on 20. And then, I think the oldest person there would have been Lisanne Falk, who plays Heather McNamara. Yeah.
And I've noted that. I mean, I've been kind of keeping to myself a little index as we go through these high school movies of age accuracy.
Yeah.
And I mean, Grease is by a long shot the least accurate age-wise.
Right.
But all the rest have, if not perfectly, they are closer to age accurate. There's people in Dazed and Confused, in Fame, and now in Heathers who all are of the proper age to be playing high schoolers.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that Winona Ryder, when she found out about this script during the production of Beetlejuice, that she was fighting tooth and nail to be in this movie.
I love this detail. This
Yeah.
is a detail that really endeared this movie to me. Was that the lead actress literally got on her hands and knees, or she begged the producer.
Wasn't it that her
agent got on her hands and knees,
to not do it,
begged her to not do it, said that she would never work again, and that she also went to the producer Denise Denovi's office and said she'd do the movie for $1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's, I think it's so good that she did get the role because, I mean, Winona Ryder is a fantastic actress. But I think when I think of all the things I've seen her in, which are a few, not very many, but a noticeable few, this is definitely the one that stands out.
This is like the prototypical Winona Ryder role to me.
Yeah. And I think she still says to this day that this is like her favorite movie and her favorite role that she's ever done.
Yeah. I wrote a couple quotes in an interview that she did right after the movie came out. She said, quote, "People were trying to talk me out of it, and I was saying, whatever you said to me wouldn't make a difference, even if you said that the movie wouldn't be released or that I wouldn't get any money from it. I wouldn't have cared. I just wanted to say those lines and work with those people."
Yeah. And maybe you'll get to this one, but I mean, I think she had also spoken when they were reflecting on the fact that this movie did not do very well at the box office. Mm-hmm. She was like, I wasn't even paying attention to that.
Yeah.
Because I was just really glad that like this movie was good.
Yep.
Because it was a movie that I felt so passionately about.
That is true artistry.
I know.
And I think even in spite of the more, morally corrupt aspects of Veronica as a character, I think she's generally seen, by viewers as kind of, I don't know if redemptive is the right word, but she's respected a lot as a character. Mm-hmm. I think particularly for the arc that she takes in the latter half of the movie.
Right.
Listening to the commentary, a lot of the discussion was about how people who were either critics of the movie or like people involved in the production who were skeptical of it were worried that it would encourage some of the bad behaviors that it's depicting, like that it would encourage a wave of teenage suicides. But I think that Dan Waters and director Michael Lehman were saying they looked at statistics that suggested it actually prevented more suicides than it caused.
Right. I also thought it was interesting because in that same commentary, you hear that Dan Waters had a very specific intention that he wanted to make a movie that was anti-teenage suicide.
Yeah.
But that the producer and the director didn't necessarily feel the same way.
Yeah.
And I also love that like this script sort of had clearly had an intention from which it originated, but that also was kind of put in the hands of people that treated it a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that as a result, you get that sort of artistic tension and you get this movie that really does feel like it could kind of go either way.
Yeah.
And not necessarily like, you should commit suicide, but that it sort of softened some of those, maybe some of the edges that Dan Waters was going for.
Whether or not to commit suicide is one of the most important decisions a teenager can make.
I know.
Get a job.
I love that line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think part of the intrigue with Veronica as a character is that even in her morally corrupt aspects, she still provides for viewers this vessel to skewer the traditions and hierarchies of high school that we don't really get in ordinary real life.
Right. Mm-hmm. She's basically like the audience avatar.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. If you come into this movie with some type of cynicism about or feeling like there's hypocrisy. You mentioned at the very beginning this sort of idea that there's some unspeakable tragedy that happens and that suddenly people behave differently.
Yeah. Which I think Winona Ryder said
exactly.
she saw in her own high school when somebody died from suicide and suddenly everybody was like talking about how much they miss this person and how much they love this person and she like views this, and I think that was part of her motivation for wanting to take this role, because she sees this and she's like, this is disgusting because you're rewriting history.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just want to mention one other thing before we get off the Winona Ryder train, which is I listened to an interview with her from about 9 years and 2 months and 6 days ago. And she said that she was in Atlanta at like a sandwich shop ordering something. And I guess it involved substitutions of some kind or something. But the waiter told her, you gave me Heathers, so I'll give you whatever you want.
Oh,
Which
that's so
I
sweet.
think is very, very fun. And I think
Yeah.
speaks a little bit to the way that this movie has found a very passionate audience.
Yeah, but also that it's, in spite of the very salient darkness in the movie that it can check that one off your bingo cards. But despite the very salient darkness of Heathers, I mean, it's very encouraging that it can inspire such this sincere appreciation amongst fans.
Yeah.
There's so many ironies about that, but that sometimes you need that irony to really have something heartwarming.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah, but maybe, like you said, we might be getting off the Winona Ryder train, but there is a little more about Veronica that I do want to say.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think of this, but I had the thought watching the movie this time that, do you get the sense that perhaps Veronica's parents encouraged her to become friends with the Heathers?
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. So this
Yeah.
is something I thought about for the very first time rewatching this. I was trying to figure out how Veronica, what type of cachet she had in order to, get folded into the Heathers clique.
And it's money.
It's money. Yeah, they have like this palatial estate. They
Yeah.
have this backyard that's great for croquet,
Yeah.
which I love as like a metaphor for life in this movie.
And they essentially have like a sculpture garden in their
Exactly.
backyard.
It's just like the Heathers see her as capital, basically.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a town that had, I think, kind of this class divide in some ways. Like, I think a lot about my time in high school and that there being like a lot of the more popular kids were kids with money and kids that had known each other from birth because their parents all went to the same country club. And
Right.
and I think that was so much of like how popular cliques were formed in my own high school. So I guess that, going back to an earlier question, that is one thing that, although I didn't experience because I was not one of those people, if I was like on the outside looking in, it looked like that was so much of how these cliques came to be in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it all goes back to the womb and it all has to do with money.
And it's funny because this movie does seem to make or trying to make a point about how you grow up, become adults, and die. I think is one of the lines that I love in this, but that there is something about your parents, which while you might be super checked out with or have a very calcified sort of relationship with, that their influence is very important for how you are seen in your own social circles.
Yeah, and they also seem to just let her do whatever she wants, and like, lucky for them, she seems fairly responsible other than the murders. But like, she straight up tells them like, I'm going to this college party, and they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
Have fun.
Yeah. Sometimes, just off the last point, it really seems like rich is a better word than popular. Because I
Yeah.
remember there were kids I knew in high school who, might have fit the traditional mold of popular, but really, I think it was just that they were like the most affluent students in the school. And like, when you think about the word popular, that implies well-known. I mean, there were people there I probably knew nothing more than their name. And these were not people who were friends with everyone or knew everyone in the grade. So I really think, I like what you were both saying about how money really influences it more than actual like popularity.
That's the odd thing I think about the idea of a popular crowd, is that it's not literal at all. It's like in no way is like a popular person just a person that's friends with everybody. Like that's almost the opposite of what it typically is, at least in media.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes when you consider like popular entertainment, maybe what that really means is entertainment that has the most money behind it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I was curious what brought Veronica in. And the other thing that I thought of was that she has a skill
Oh yeah, this
that
forgery.
they exploit.
Right.
Yeah.
The forgery, which then helps her not just with the Heathers, but also with JD
Yeah,
and his
he
and his
also
plans.
exploits it.
Yeah, something I did want to mention a little bit was how there's it almost feels like a throwaway line when she and JD have hooked up in their backyard, and she talks about how she was apparently very smart.
Yeah.
And that she, like a lot of people thought that she should have skipped a couple grades, but that her parents held her back because they were afraid that she was going to have trouble making friends.
Yeah.
And one of the things that always sticks out with me with Veronica's character is that she is very intelligent, but she's not very socially intelligent.
Yeah, she's
lets
naive.
herself get led around a lot.
That is a really interesting detail because I think it paints a lot of the rest of the movie in a slightly different light, in that she really should be smarter than this.
Right.
Like, I think about the scene right before they off Kurt and Ram.
Yeah,
Right,
I was
right.
thinking of that too.
Yeah, where JD tells her that they're going to be shooting these guys with like trank bullets.
Ichluga bullets.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Ichluga
It's a funny
bullets.
anecdote about that.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's in the commentary that Ishluga, if like it's not a real name for a bullet, it's a compound word of I'm lying.
Yeah.
In German.
Ishluga in German
Yeah.
means I'm lying.
Yeah, I didn't listen to the commentary, but I did Google this
Oh,
because
yeah.
I was like, what are, like, Veronica, you're not this dumb.
Well, yeah.
And maybe she's blinded a little bit by
I think it's a big part of it.
I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of it, is that like she really likes him, she's really attracted to him, and like
Lethal attraction.
exactly
Yeah.
lethal attraction, and like they're very hell bent on what they're doing, and she's excited about the plan. But I'm like, come on, Veronica. And she
Yeah.
says this later. She's like, how could I be so stupid? And I'm like, yes, how could you be so stupid? Like, you
Yeah.
are smarter than that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's something that the movie leaves a little bit open-ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about how she goes along with the quote-unquote unintentional death.
Yeah.
There's that scene where they're cooking up the hangover cure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are cups, right, that they pour it in. And in a moment, speaking, I think, to what you were saying before, or that we were kind of alluding to, might be the reason why she's letting all this happen, is right before she grabs the cup, she has a very passionate kiss with JD.
Yeah, and she's like not really paying attention.
And she's not paying attention, and it is completely just washed over her what cup she might actually be grabbing. And admittedly, I think the two of them have really good chemistry.
Oh, they totally
throughout
do.
the film, like
You're like,
watching the-
okay, I get it.
I mean, that's a detail that has to work.
Yeah.
If you're going to think that all of her quote unquote intelligence would just evaporate around
Yeah.
this guy. I think it is as simple as that.
Yeah, we were talking to our coworker George earlier, and he was like, every girl I dated in high school said that they were so attracted to JD.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, and that also was mentioned, I think, by either Dan Waters or Michael Lehman in the commentary, that a lot of young boys who watched the movie would idolize him, missing the irony of their doing so.
Oh yeah, it's very Fight Club in that
Yeah,
way.
they
Yeah.
compared it to A Clockwork Orange.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, well, it's, I mean, we haven't talked too much about Christian Slater's performance here, but one of the very common things to say about it is that he was channeling Jack Nicholson the whole time.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was, totally intentional on his part, too.
Yeah, he said he had just watched The Witches of Eastwick, which I know you and I both don't really like.
Yeah,
that
I
much.
never
don't-
seen
I
it.
don't care for that.
Yeah, I don't really
Yeah.
care for it either, but Jack Nicholson is going for it in
Well,
this
Yeah, he's
movie.
doing something.
Interestingly, I mean, that's another Joker.
Yeah, that is
Yeah,
another
of
Joker. There we
course.
go.
And that movie comes out after Heathers.
Yeah.
And is directed by Tim Burton, who directed Beetlejuice.
I mean, JD so desperately wants to be the Joker.
Yeah.
He does. Yeah, he definitely
Yeah.
does.
But also, it's interestingly in Christian Slater's life, I happened to notice that in the mid 2000s that he played McMurphy in a production of One Flew Over
He
the Cuckoo's
definitely
Nest.
did.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, we were talking earlier about how, I said that I felt like this is the like prototypical Winona Ryder performance. Like there are all these characteristics that really impact the career that she ended up having in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing with Christian Slater. Like this movie
Yeah.
completely created a way for audiences to engage with him in the future. He was charming and there's like something about him
He's
that,
dangerous.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
dangerous.
He's a bad
yeah.
boy.
There, like he could be violent at any moment, which you were saying, I think makes him a really good Randall McMurphy.
Yeah.
But it's like, he's in a slew of movies in the 90s, like Pump Up the Volume. I talked earlier about a movie called Cuffs that I think very much riffs on this idea. But, he was in Interview with the Vampire.
True Romance.
Yeah,
True
True
I think
Romance.
True Romance definitely.
Which I haven't
is-
seen, but I
He
know
was in a
about.
movie called He Was a Quiet Man. Have you guys heard of this movie?
No.
I watched this movie just because I became obsessed with Heathers, and I watched literally anything I could get my hands on that had Winona Ryder and Christian Slater. Honestly, try me. I think I've seen everything.
Love that.
Wow.
He Was Quiet Man, another movie. It's like he's kind of like a loner, sort of charming, but also ready to shoot up his office.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I mean, this
Yeah.
is like, this movie feels very like ground zero for both of these actors and how we would eventually get to know them.
While
Yeah.
we're talking about Christian Slater, I have a question about JD, which I think is mostly a question for you as somebody that's seen this movie 10,000 times, but I'd love to see hear your opinion on this as well. Has JD done this before?
I think, okay, so
We're gonna-
I think that
We're going to talk about that a little bit too. Yeah.
I don't know if he's done all of this before, but I do think that the first thing you see him really do in the movie, which is pull out a gun in the cafeteria
he had
and
that
fire
ready.
bullets.
He was
Love
like,
it.
He's
I'm
done
just
that before.
waiting for
Yeah.
Something
some
to that effect.
douchebags.
He doesn't bat an eye at that.
I was going to
Yeah.
say, I love that moment. I remember when I first watched that movie, that was the moment when I was like, what am I watching?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah, that
totally.
was
You know?
for me too. That was when I realized just what kind of movie this
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, like I have to say, I came into this movie in the last week, seeing it for the first time, knowing pretty much nothing. And I'm not
Wow.
sure how I managed that. I didn't know anything about this movie.
I'm so jealous of
I
you.
knew that you loved it, and I knew it was set in high school. And that's it.
Cool.
And so it's that moment where I'm like, now I understand what kind of movie this is.
Right.
It
Yeah.
absolutely sets the tone.
Yeah, has JD done all this before?
I'm not sure. One of the other little details that I love is when Heather Chandler drinks liquid drainer and just crashes through a glass
the
table.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll make some time for this, but I think this is a very well-directed movie.
Oh,
like
yeah.
that scene is very powerful when it happens, and it kind of stops the movie in its tracks, but he can think on his feet because
Yeah.
he sees the cliff notes. I love it. It's cliff notes for
It's
the
for the bell
for the bell
jar.
jar, and immediately makes the connection that maybe there's a way suicide can be involved
Oh
in this.
wow,
Yeah.
I didn't even pick up on that.
Oh
one.
yeah, I was like, that is dark.
Yeah,
Oh,
he can think on his
wow.
feet in moments like this, which again make you think maybe he's done this before.
There was a line that on my second watch in the last week where he says, I think he says it to Veronica, I think after he finds her like on her double date. I think that's where he says it. He says 7 schools in 7 states, and the only thing different is my locker combination.
Yeah.
And it was that line this time where I'm like, you've killed people at this point.
Yeah.
And you're still
I like
saying that. So what does that mean exactly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
I mean, he's been exposed to violent death at a young age with his mother walking into a building that his father was demolishing, knowing that it was about to be demolished. And now I'm thinking a little bit about A Simple Plan, having said that, given the Jacob's consciousness of the father's death in that movie,
Yeah.
where he's just kind of like jaded about it. And part of what I was thinking about with JD was this line that happens in the second scene that takes place in his living room, where Veronica asks him, do you hate your father? Or do you even love your father? And he says, I haven't given it that much thought.
Yeah, I think it was like, do you even like your father?
Do you even like your
Which
father?
I think is an important distinction if I'm getting that correct.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're right.
Because you love your parents.
Yeah.
Like by default, normally.
Yeah.
Do you like your parents is a different question.
Yeah.
And he has a really strange dynamic with his dad, which
Yeah.
is that it seems like the only way they know how to communicate with one another is if they flip roles.
Is
Yeah.
role play.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. In the commentary, Dan Waters said that was a very intentional line for him. And that was one of those moments he was kind of flipping the John Hughes perspective, because there's this idea in John Hughes movies and movies of that sort that the parents are kind of the engine of tension driving the kids, that everything they do is in opposition to the parents.
Right.
But that the reality of being a teenager in the experience of Dan Waters and many real people is that you don't really think that much about it. You're kind of just acting on impulse.
Yeah,
Right.
and how like he's also like mirroring what his dad does for a living
Yeah.
when he goes to, try to blow up the school, because his dad works in construction and like blows up buildings.
Right. And seems to get off on taking advantage
Yeah.
of people, right?
You also mentioned that JD's mother died from walking into a building that his father was demolishing, which is totally could have been what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I had a little bit of there was foul play here, like taste in my
Interesting.
mouth, where
Yeah.
I'm like, particularly because we don't know how old JD was when this happened. He doesn't tell us. And so he may have a different interpretation from what actually happened. So I watched this and I'm like, this man is a sociopath. This guy killed his wife. and lied to his son about what happened. And I don't know that that's true, but I think JD's dad very villainous and has raised a sociopath.
Right.
So
Now that I'm
I'm just
thinking
saying
about
it's
it-
possible.
No,
Now that I'm
think it's
thinking about
possible.
it, I actually did have a hint of that watching the movie too, because when JD is telling that story with his dad present in the room, he doesn't seem to wince at it at all.
He kind of like he gives them this look,
Yeah.
but it's more of like a,
Hey, let's not talk about this
yeah,
anymore.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're kind of talking about these details that I think in some odd way are meant, or an interpretation, I guess,
Yeah.
that's meant to humanize JD a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I remember upon first watching this movie was that while I was disgusted by a lot of what he does, I feel like that the movie is directed in such a way where for a little while you're meant to actually really feel bad for this guy.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
like he was most likely raised by a sociopath and he's become a sociopath as a result. And at the very end of this movie, when he decides to blow up the whole high school, you said it earlier, you know, that he has this sort of delusion of grandeur
Yeah.
in his head about what he's doing, that he says in a really like rushed, sort of angry way, maybe I'm doing this, you know, because nobody loves me, which the first time I saw this, I was like, okay, it feels like a little, whatever. Then also he has that line where he goes, you know, maybe the only way that people that are different in high school that don't get along would actually get along in heaven, which again, watching it, I was like, what?
That struck my ear weird the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I mean, he's like a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
And when you're 17, you have things like that floating in your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
You're like, this kid probably grew up with some form of like Christianity or Catholicism, something
Christian
in him.
Slater.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, that's still bouncing around in his head a little bit. And he feels just so angry about the world that he doesn't realize that he could have had this great relationship with a girl that he totally blew.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you know, that nobody loves me is just something of his own doing.
Yeah.
And I love that this movie makes his final stand this total admission that he's a 17-year-old. Like, I think it actually made this movie feel more real to me.
Yeah.
Which is that this kid who's capable of doing all this is just so deeply confused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. The more I watch it, the more I'm like, no, like I kind of like this. I kind of
Yeah.
like that it's this jumble in his head that's just sort of coming out. And then, yeah, this like delusion of grandeur that like he's making some giant statement
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
when he
It's gonna
dies,
change the
it's going to
generation.
change the world. And you're like, again, seeing it in a post-Columbine time,
Yeah.
the details like that feel like scary how real that really becomes.
Yeah, and perhaps this is a good way to talk about the original ending of the movie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which was, I mean, in a certain way, quite a bit darker than what we actually see in the cut that was released. Was that Veronica was going to kill JD in that boiler room and then attach the bomb to herself and, you know, go off with it. And then the actual end of the movie was going to be in heaven.
Yeah, prom in heaven.
Yeah, prom in heaven.
With
So-
with liquid drainer in the punch
Like the
bowl.
punch.
Yeah. And that, like, you know, it's this kind of, I mean, it's a sort of like too happy ending that you see. And maybe that kind of thing makes me think always of like Blue Velvet.
Right.
Where it's
Yeah.
just, it's a little too sunny at the end.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of storytelling, I would have understood that ending quite a bit.
Yeah.
But it was swayed away from having that over concern that, well, I mean, how exactly would we define this concern?
It sounded to me like the production company was like, we love the script, we just don't like the ending.
Yeah.
We'll let you make the movie, you just have to do a different ending.
Yeah.
I got to admit, if that ending happened, I don't think I would have had the response to this movie. That's just
yeah.
me personally.
I
Because
kind of understand that.
yeah, I think it creates this good arc. And when I say good, I don't mean like good, like, oh,
Like
this person is
morally.
now good, but like a better arc
Yeah.
from a narrative perspective for Veronica.
Yeah.
I think it makes JD this much more complicated person.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, to me, the ending is way more powerful. It's so
Agreed.
much
Yeah.
better.
That was another detail that actually made me think of Get Out, because that movie, as different as it is in subject matter, that movie initially also had a darker ending
Yeah.
That's
than-
a good point.
than what you
Yes.
see in the theatrical cut.
Yes.
Though-
And I think that movie is better for not having that ending.
I agree. Yeah. And also that's a movie with a very heightened portrayal of a real issue. So it's like, again, for all the differences in that, I was thinking about that a few times watching Heathers. But we said we'd put a pin in this discussion about the ending from earlier, and now I think we're coming back to it, where after JD offs himself, that Veronica she's not hurt, but she is within the blast radius enough that she's
able to light a cigarette.
Yeah, it lights her cigarette.
Love that
Mythbusters
detail.
would probably disprove that, but but she is charred from it and goes back inside the school. And then Heather Duke sees her and goes, "You look like
you look like hell."
And it's just, and what does she say?
I just got back.
Just got back.
Yeah. And then she steals that, what do you call
Scrunchie.
it? The scrunchie in that Heather Chandler.
Yeah,
That
Heather
Duke-
Chandler.
Originally,
it was originally Heather Chandler.
that
It's
Heather
also
Duke-
the very first image you see of the movie.
It is, yeah. That scrunchie is a through line. It's the MacGuffin. But yeah, that Veronica steals that for herself and then invites Martha Dunstock to hang out.
Right.
And I think that the sweetness of that last interaction is like what stuck with me the most at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Probably with many people. I don't know if it makes Veronica real, but it does, I think, put a nice cherry on top of her arc that makes her the idol that she is for many people.
Yeah, because
Right.
when we see her at the beginning, when we're first introduced to her, and Heather Chandler convinces her to write like a note to Martha, posing as like a boy, saying that they like Martha.
It's either Ram or Kurt.
Yeah, it's one of those.
It was Kurt.
Sure,
It'll give
I
her
trust
shower
you.
nozzle masturbation material for weeks.
And so really Martha is the first person that we see Veronica being like culpable in the bullying of.
Right.
And so it does give her this full circle moment for Martha to be the person that she reaches out to at the end. Like, yes, as you alluded to earlier, we also see her like reunite with Betty Finn briefly. But I do think like Martha being the one that she kind of walks off, into the sunset hallway with. And I absolutely love the moment where, because Martha's on in a motorized wheelchair because she has earlier in the film also attempted suicide.
Which honestly is a really harrowing moment of this movie.
Yeah.
The movie
They
gets
said a hard
dead
scene to
serious
shoot.
in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a hard scene to shoot apparently too.
Yeah.
Just because of the emotions present for it, and also Martha is the only character we see in this movie who really tries to commit suicide.
Actually,
Yeah, exactly. Everyone else is just framed for it.
Yeah.
Sorry, but you love that ending
Yeah, I
moment
love
there.
that
Sorry.
because Martha is like riding around in circles, which I think is just really adorable.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think maybe that last scene, the message that it gives people, even though it's only a small slice of the movie, is just you don't have to be one of the cool kids. Be friends with whoever you are.
And I love that. I think
Yeah.
it's great. And I wrote this a little bit to you guys, which is that the very end of this movie, I think, frustrated some early reviewers, and people were like, "Oh, this movie had such a satirical, like cynical edge," and then at the end, it kind of veers away.
Yeah, but I do think that is a stronger move for the for the movie, because if it leans too much into that cynicism, well, then it kind of loses something.
Right.
Yeah.
Although, actually, speaking of dark endings, I do want to make a point about. Go back to context for a moment, but not something that came before Heathers, but something that it has very obviously influenced, which is a movie that came out within the last year called Bottoms, directed by Emma Seligman, starring Rachel Sennott and Iowa Debary. And that movie, for anyone who's seen it, there is such an apparent homage to Heathers in it.
Oh, yeah.
Like Emilio, you pointed out that, light spoiler for Bottoms, there is a bomb in that movie too that is identical to the one in Heathers.
Yeah.
But also that movie, even without that detail, I was thinking so much about Heathers while watching it because of there being this heightened reality of high school in it where, there is like violence is shown in a weirdly casual way.
Yeah. And the thing about Bottoms, I zoned out for a second. You probably did give a spoiler warning for Bottoms, but just second spoiler warning. A lot of people die in that movie.
Yeah.
And like the most casual way where they just sort of are like, I think some of these guys are dead.
Yeah.
We'll deal with it later.
Yeah.
We're just not going to talk about it.
The ending of that movie, I'll leave a little detail out, but the ending of that movie is an objectively horrifying thing, but it's treated as fun by the characters.
Yeah, almost like a rousing celebratory moment in some way.
Yeah, which is interesting too, because I think the ending of that movie worked for me watching it, but it doesn't really have the redemptive edge that Heathers does. It's more like it's redemptive in the minds of the characters, but there's enough the viewer can see the dramatic irony enough that you know it's not really that.
Right. Yeah.
I found it very interesting that movie had no apparent social media in it. And I have a theory about why.
I have another theory too.
I think that movie exists inside social media. I think that movie is meant to be a representation of social media excess. I feel like it's in a subtle way the lifeblood of that movie.
Boom.
And
Okay.
Heathers is a movie that predates social media, but the points are still very prescient, as evidenced by films like Bottoms.
Right. I was going to say my theory for that is that plot lines that could have been very easily solved or explained away if someone just called somebody or texted somebody or whatever. I just think it doesn't make for good stories.
Yeah. I would also say it ages your movie a lot.
Definitely.
Because social media is so ever evolving that you put like what may feel like modern social media into your movie now, and then somebody watches your movie 10 years from now and or beyond, and it will seem, I think, incredibly dated.
On the subject of dating a movie, I think one of the things that Heathers does very well is that the language is so unique to the film. How very exactly. That I think it allows it to be seen by more contemporary audiences and still feels very fresh.
Yeah, it transcends just like normal teen slang because it is so heightened.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like How Very is an ancestor of That's So Fetch.
Something,
totally.
yes,
And
which
Mean
again,
Girls, for all of its, very prescient points, I mean, it is a softer movie than Heathers.
big time.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, it's not to take anything away from Mean Girls,
Absolutely
though. I mean,
not.
that movie totally hits hard.
Yeah.
Even for its heightened aspect, it's not quite as extreme as Heathers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love, maybe we'll just go back, we'll do some quick hits. Movies that kind of predate Heathers that I think lay a little bit of a breadcrumb trail for it. I thought about a movie that we spoke about a little while ago, was Risky Business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is that it's like a Trojan horse of a movie because it's clearly a statement about the corrupting nature of greed, but it's disguised as like a high school sex comedy.
The moment in Heathers when I thought the most of Risky Business is there's like that, I forget his name, but that other kid who's part of the newspaper club.
Oh, Peter.
Who is like, I think he's filming the rally that happens in the
love that
cafeteria.
moment.
Yeah.
And he's like,
Can I get a video of this
for my Princeton application? I love it. That's the moment when I thought of Risky Business.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And there's also the moment where he's praying and he goes, fast acceptance into an Ivy League school, and please let it be Harvard.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I thought of Risky Business. Obviously, this movie is a riff in a lot of ways on John Hughes stuff.
Yeah.
And I felt like the prototypical movie for that would be like Breakfast Club, right?
Yeah.
There's this sort of clashing cliques that are forced to coexist, so to speak.
A lot of the cast members, at least, of Heathers said they didn't dislike John Hughes movies, but that didn't mean that they were not compelled by the script of Heathers.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
more like Dan Waters and Michael Lehman, who even they, it's qualified. They had some appreciation for John Hughes,
Yeah.
but they also knew that
We're
this is
ready
not
for something
everyone's
else.
view of high school. They
Yeah.
wanted to impose their own.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also think of a movie called River's Edge. Do you guys know that movie?
No.
It's about a guy who murders his girlfriend and tells all of his friends about it. It's this kind of coming to grips with violence as a young person and like,
Yeah.
should we do something about this or not? I think of those movies a lot when I think about movies that sort of predate Heathers. But then, this movie I think has had a tremendous influence on high school movies that came after. I mean, I think of Clueless, honestly, when I think of Heathers too.
As of now, I have yet to see, but we're covering that later this
Wonderful,
cycle.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
I think of this movie called Teaching Mrs. Tingle. Have you guys seen
Which I
that
don't
movie?
know.
It's like a high school movie that deals with killing a teacher instead of popular kids. You talked about loving Juno.
Yeah,
I think
love
Diablo
Juno.
Cody is very clearly influenced by Heathers. She's said it before, but movies like, I think the other movie she made, Jennifer's Body, is like a very clear homage to the energy and the spirit of a movie like Heathers.
Very much so.
I still have yet to see that.
Yeah. I have not seen 13 Reasons Why, but I know that you've seen it and you've read the book.
Yeah, so I read the book and I remember hating it. I remember thinking it was really, really poorly written.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did not care for the book. I watched the first season of the show, even though I read the book and hated it. I watched the first season of the show. Also don't remember liking it at all. But it does play on this idea that is introduced in Heathers of like the reaction that the public has to, and specifically in like a high school, would have to somebody dying from suicide.
Right. And this idea that the students themselves know that that kind of response will come to them,
Yeah.
which is something that Heather's definitely toys with, that these characters are committing suicide because maybe there's some cachet with it.
There's a
And
trend.
Exactly. And I put
Yeah.
it in quotes because none of these people that die have actually committed suicide.
In
except-
Heather's, yeah.
Exactly. Except
Yeah.
for one of them. Yeah.
And that, like, in writing it, Dan Waters and Michael Lehman, the director, understood that, of course, this is not some trend. This is a very real problem.
Yeah.
But that a lot of people are shallow enough to perceive it as that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's part of what Heather's is a satire of.
I'm wondering if maybe we could take some time to talk about maybe some more specific details that just really resonate with us from this movie.
I've got one. There was a set decoration during one scene that I absolutely loved. It was placed there during the scene when Veronica opens up Heather Chandler's locker. This is after Heather Chandler has died, and the locker is
Sealed off.
It's blocked off by the police for investigation. And inside, there is a little image that says, "I shop, therefore I am." Do either of you
I know that
know
one.
the provenance of that image?
I think therefore I am
Or
Descartes.
Yeah.
the phrase, yes. But
Yes.
specifically that image is created by the artist Barbara Kruger, who is still around today as a prominent visual artist and made a lot of prominent work in the 1980s. And I saw this retrospective when I was visiting family in Chicago at the Art Institute there.
Love the Art Institute.
Yeah, great
Shout
museum.
out to Art Institute. Love
Shout
it.
out to the Art Institute. But her artwork is eerily prescient. There are images that she made in the 1980s that look almost pixel for pixel like an Instagram story.
Wow.
It's scary.
What's her name again?
Barbara Kruger.
Thank you.
Yes,
Cool.
like Freddie.
Okay.
But yeah, so that image being in the film, it's, an image made with some amount of irony, but it also makes a lot of sense that a person like Heather Chandler would see that and not get the irony at all.
Love it.
Yeah.
How about you, Madeline?
One that I like is when they're in the boiler room, like as he's trying to plant the bomb, and he has some technical difficulties at
He
times.
definitely does.
And I like that a lot, and it made me think of Barry.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
With
Which
the
is-
app?
Exactly, which it's like maybe one of the best scenes in Barry.
Yeah.
And maybe one of you can give a better synopsis. I've only seen it once, but I just remember Barry having to set off a bomb, and he's like supposed to use this app but like the detonator isn't working, and so he has to like call the tech support for the bomb.
Yeah.
And the timing of it actually going off is so perfectly offbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite good. I also
Yeah.
just love how NoHo Hank is like, you just get the app.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, hold phone.
Yeah. Great.
But
So
yeah,
I
it's-
just thought about that. I was like, they need like the tech support from Barry because she was so helpful. I mean, it took a while, but eventually she got it working.
Yeah.
Speaking
she
of
did.
great dark comedies too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That means to make another actually a Dark Knight comparison from that moment in The Dark Knight when the Joker is about to set off the bomb in the hospital and he pushes
Oh,
the
yes.
button and
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And he has to like mess with it a few times and then it happens.
I feel like that's like a pretty strong trope in movies.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
here we go, the countdown. Click, 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 nothing.
Apparently that was a real error on set too.
Is that really?
Yeah, the actual detonation that they had wasn't going off and Heath Ledger was like, what's wrong with this thing?
Ah, got it. I'm also
Yeah.
thinking of Ocean's 11. You guys see Ocean's
Yes,
11?
it's been a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
but
there's
yes.
that scene where they have to set off an electric charge. It similarly happens in that way, in an unexpected way.
Yeah.
Cool.
What about you, Emilio?
Yeah, I want to make just a little bit of time for the college party. Watching it this
yeah.
time, I felt things that I did not feel when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I was just really bowled over by the predatory nature.
Oh yeah, I felt
that party.
the ick with
Oh,
these
yeah.
men.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing that I felt so bad for was how Heather Chandler is so willing to play that role.
Yeah.
When she first arrived, she's like, "Yeah, like I'm here to party, right?"
Yeah.
And how quickly that goes away. And one of the images from this movie that I think just really typifies how strong this movie is from a perspective of what it kind of leaves ingrained in your brain is that moment where after she's performed some sort of sexual favor for this guy, she is just alone in the bathroom and she's washing out her mouth and she spits at her reflection in the mirror.
Yeah.
That scene hit me in a way that it has not hit me in past
Yeah,
viewings.
I thought that
Yeah.
it's interesting to see Heather Chandler, who up to this point in the movie, we've seen as this like queen bee, like all powerful. She's like, everybody here loves me. She's more explicit than that, and I'm only a junior. Like
they want me as a friend or something else.
or something else.
Yeah.
But then she gets to this party and we see her in a much more vulnerable position.
Exactly.
Because even somebody that has a lot of power in like one scenario, like when they're put in a different scenario, like and they lose that power, like their personality comes across very differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also just think that college party scene, I would encourage anybody who sees the movie or wants to see the movie, watch it and spend some time with that. I feel like there are so many little details that spell out emotions and deeper interiorities of the characters. That scene that Veronica, where she's putting her hand over the flame.
Yeah.
Daniel Waters was really interested in the idea of self-harm for these characters. That self-harm was a way to sort of test their boundaries, but also tie it to these like very strong emotions.
Yeah.
Apparently he learned a lot about this from his younger sister and a lot of her experiences in high school. But that Denise Denovi, who is a female producer, that she also was bothered by these details initially, but that later upon reflection, she's like, these are actually scenes that are very strong.
Yeah.
That even though they're kind of dark, they bring you into her character a lot more.
They show you something real.
I will stop talking about it now, but the college party, it to me is like a real skeleton key to this movie.
Yeah, and it gives you a sense that part of Veronica's motivation is that she's detached.
Right.
She wants to feel something. And that's, you see that in that moment. You see it when she burns herself with the lighter later on, too.
Yeah.
Amidst the myriad of things that she is that are motivating her, I think that's a very considerable portion of it, too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anything else from your list?
Well, yeah, of little details. I mean, I don't know if I can explain this one, but just on in the set of Veronica's room, that her dresser doors, like the knobs on them are all punctuation
Love
marks.
this.
Yeah.
I don't, so good.
I don't know if there's any meaning to glean from that, but I just like that that's there.
Me too.
As eye candy.
And also, we haven't talked about her little monocle.
Yes.
Which actually
The diary.
has a meaning to it, because there was an intention, I think, on Dan Waters' part and that monocle was more present, I think, in the original draft of the script.
Yeah, I heard that too.
And that was intended to resemble Albert Speer, who was a very prominent Nazi, and to indicate the immoral side of Veronica.
Right, which something he was way more interested in. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think in his initial drafts of the script, he really wanted her to be a lot darker. But I think as the movie went on, and I think, Winona Ryder, we've talked about, clearly loved this movie and felt so drawn to this character that I think she imbues a lot of like emotional resonance that he didn't put there. And so
and the one other little detail that I have to point out is that following the staged suicide of Heather Chandler, the first scene when you see Veronica and the Heathers after that, Heather Duke is just so clearly in the center of that shot.
Yeah.
I really love the visual storytelling there, because that kind of indicates that, as with the power vacuum, that Heather Duke is the next in line to assume this throne, so to speak, and that you have Veronica and Heather McNamara on the side. McNamara being pretty despondent after the whole thing, and Veronica just trying to take it all in.
And then Heather Duke obviously chowing down.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
Throwing the chicken wing
she's
behind
not
her.
She's not afraid at all of the shame that she's going to feel.
And one thing that shortly after, when you see a bunch of the kids, her included, being interviewed for the TV, and we're watching this back on the news, and she says a couple of times oh, well, Heather and I, we were the same size, and so we would share clothes a lot, and that was always very fun. And we see her struggling with this eating disorder. It gives you the sense that part of that was not just maintaining an ideal body type, but being able to, ideal body type,
right?
But being able to have that bonding moment with Heather Chandler,
right?
Of being able to share clothes with the queen bee because we're the same size. Whereas Heather McNamara, she's very tall, so she probably can't share the same clothes, but they have that bond.
Yeah, I love that. Anything else from you?
I just I like Martha Dunstock a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And I like that through most of the film she doesn't have any lines. I think the only line she has is at the very end. And she does so much with no dialogue.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really cool.
Yeah. I thought that her and Betty Finn were probably the two people in this movie who I thought were the most sympathetic.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, with an argument for Heather McNamara too, I think that she's the one member of the Heathers who could plausibly not belong there and be fine.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that I also love is I think there's just some fun formal decisions that are made in this movie. Part of the lore of this film is that Dan Waters wanted Kubrick to direct it.
Yeah.
And obviously he didn't get Stanley Kubrick to direct it, but I know that Michael Lehman, the director, snuck a lot of Kubrickian elements to the look of the film.
Yes.
He talks about how a lot of the cafeteria scenes for shooting that, they referenced Full Metal Jacket, and the way that the light was diffused and the way that the camera sort of follows characters just below eye level, and low angled shots from wide angled lenses. And there's that. And then also there's the color stuff, which I know seems like a little on the nose, but I really love all the color symbolism in this movie.
Yeah.
The red for power, the green for envy, the yellow for
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
And one other little detail now that I'm thinking about it that I have to mention before we transition away is the music in this movie.
I was just going to say that. Go for it.
So good. I mean, it's a lot of the aesthetic details are great. The cinematography is excellent. The editing's excellent. Music as well by David Newman. And
of the Newman family.
Of the Newman tribe,
scoring family, yeah. And I don't want this to sound like a shallow connection, but we've said this about a different movie before, but I thought it sounded a lot like Angelo Badalamenti, who has scored a lot of David Lynch works. And I think the similarity is that there are these very big orchestral sounds that are aimed for with the score, but achieved by fairly modest means. You can tell a lot of it's happening on one or two keyboards.
Yeah.
It feels kind of like there's a soap opera air to it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which is definitely true for Twin Peaks as well. But it works for this movie given the archetypes that it's playing with.
I love the music in this movie too. It is very dated in a way, but it's also the datedness and the kind of disconnectedness that sometimes dated music makes you feel services the idea that we're kind of watching a dream. I'll be really honest, the first time I saw this movie, I felt like I was watching a dream.
Interesting.
It felt like there was a dream logic somehow to it.
And
there are dreams that do take place in this movie.
Yeah, on that point, a dream that we see is when Veronica falls asleep and kind of dreams of JD coming into her bedroom, and then they are going to Heather Duke's house to kill her and to frame
dark,
her suicide.
by the way.
Yeah.
That's very dark, but I think the music is really good in that scene. The music and the lighting in that dream sequence,
Totally.
because it's different than anywhere else in the film, and it's at that point that the movie is really embodying a lot of horror elements, very effectively.
Yeah,
and during the scene, the murder of Kurt and Ram in the woods. The music there. I mean, it's got kind of that horror edge to it as well. But I think that's one of the most effective scenes of dark comedy in the movie because of
the police officers.
Well, the officers, but also Veronica missing, and then JD points it out, but she's like, yeah, but I just wanted to see the look on his face.
Yeah.
And I love that detail too, because right away she's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What's really going on? And it's funny because that scene goes on kind of long. Honestly,
Yeah,
it goes
the
on a little
chase
long.
scene.
Apparently,
The choreography is a little strange in it too.
Apparently, Christian Slater smoked 6 packs a day, and he really struggled with all the running
He
scenes.
could only run for 10 feet at a
Exactly.
time.
Right. But I agree with you that the music in that scene toggles really nicely between something that you see in a horror movie, but also pivots to get in her head.
Yeah.
Because there are these little moments that sort of break from that where she's like, oh my God, I'm looking at a dead body. I'm responsible for this.
She still shoots the one that comes back.
That is true.
And that's, I think, a really important moment for me when I'm thinking about Veronica's character arc and her motivations and what she's capable of, is that you really do see on her face and through the music in that scene where which one gets Ram's the one
Ram
that dies
gets shot first.
So she's looking at Ram's body and she's having that moment of this guy's dead, right? She's kind of shaking him to see if he'll react, and she's getting no response, and she's still, when JD chases Kurt back to her and yells at her to shoot, she still does it.
There's the duality of pressure and also her own will there.
Or we're this deep into this.
Exactly.
I guess this has to be the way this ends.
Because I mean, JD's motivation partially with chasing him down is he can't get away. Not just because we were gonna kill him, so we have to follow through, but he's a witness now.
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like, I made the point earlier about how it took me about 2 or 3 viewings to start to consider the arc of Veronica's character. But I think that the music does a lot for the end.
Yeah,
I think that
yeah.
the end of this movie, like, it really supports this feeling that what you're really watching is a very tragic decision made by like a very confused young man.
Yeah. And well, I mean, it all ends and it begins with Que Sera, Sera.
It does.
This
It's
kind of
different. Que Sera, Sera.
By Sly Stone.
Yeah, by
Yeah.
Sly and the Family Stone. And it's, I mean, there's both like a happy and a sad meaning to that, or a happy and a dark meaning, I should say, to that song being used, because it's just this simple message of, well, that's life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, well, do we want a couple unlikely shared universes
Yeah.
here?
I think I'll go first because mine is pretty light. So let's say, and just as a disclaimer, I have not seen the movie that I'm about to describe, but I know a few things about it. Let's say that, everything that has happened in Heathers has happened, but Veronica is still so fed up with Sherwood, Ohio, that once she graduates from Westerberg, she decides to leave Ohio for Los Angeles, and she wants to divert all optics away from anything that happened during her time in Ohio. She really doesn't want any attention there, and she decides she wants to become a mechanic. And so then, in order to pursue this dream of going to a trade school and becoming a mechanic, she becomes a cab driver in Los Angeles, and one day picks up a producer in her car who thinks she might be great for a role on screen, but then she passes just because she doesn't want to be any kind of public at all after what happened in Sherwood, and just goes along with her life, lives, I don't know about happily, but lives ever after.
I love this. This is very good. I do know what you're talking about.
And this is a reference to the Jim Jarmusch movie Night on Earth, which follows 5 cab rides over the course of one night, and Winona Ryder is the driver of one of those cabs.
Gina Rowlands, I think, is the
passenger. And
there.
and Veronica adopts the name Corky.
That's true. Corky. That's good. It's
Yeah.
like nice and nondescript.
Yeah.
Did you have one?
I have one. Mine is so minor and so specific, and
I love
I don't know if either of you are going to connect this, because neither of you may not be in the right age bracket, but we will see.
If this is anything like the one you did in Greece, I cannot wait. That one is amazing. Sorry,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
I don't know that it's quite that exciting. But there was a certain student at this school who plays a fairly minor role, but the second he came on screen, I was like, I know that face. And so there's a certain student on the yearbook committee, or maybe it's a school newspaper. I wasn't entirely sure. It seemed like he seemed to be in charge of like creating the spread of the yearbook in some way. Anyway, so I looked it up, and this minor character's name is Dennis. Dennis seems to be in charge of the layout of the yearbook, but that doesn't mean he necessarily wants to go into publishing. He maybe will go into hospitality instead. So maybe he'll study hospitality in college, and then he'll move to Boston and get started in the hotel business, and move up through the ranks and eventually start managing a pretty swanky place called the Tipton Hotel. And he hires this lounge singer that has a couple of rowdy twin boys who are constantly causing trouble in his lobby. And if neither of you have gotten this at this point, it's because it is such a narrow age bracket of the Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
I was not a Disney kid, so that one went over my head.
That is totally fair.
Yeah.
But the hotel manager from that show is one of the like yearbook kids in this movie. And he has such a face that I'm like, oh yeah, that's him. The second he came on screen.
He's the one who asks Veronica, he's like, do you have any poems?
Yeah.
Or anything? He's like, we're making this spread. And he says earlier before she walks in, he's like, about teenage suicide. He's like, oh, Westerberg finally got one of these. I'm not going to blow it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's that kid.
Also,
Dennis.
Dennis. Okay. Got it. Oh, good stuff. I like that. Okay. Well, we all know at the end of Heathers, JD, spoiler, if you haven't figured it out already, decides to blow himself up with a bomb. While he's proven himself quite willful and comfortable with a gun, he's something of an unknown quantity when it comes to explosives. Mm-hmm. We see that the bomb doesn't seem to be cooperating too well with, before it goes off. So what if it malfunctioned a little bit and it didn't go off with maybe nearly the lethal force that it was supposed to. Maybe enough to make a loud sound and obviously light a cigarette, but not to actually kill him. Okay, so it doesn't kill him. Clearly messes him up pretty good. And because he seemingly is a minor when all this criminal activity has occurred, and because he can explain away his suicide attempt as just trying to do what the popular kids were doing and failing miserably, he spends very little time rehabilitating in an institution. In an attempt at a fresh start, he changes his name to Robert Boyd, also pretty nondescript. He gets his GED, finishes his associate's degree. He moves out to the West Coast, far away, sort of maybe a little bit like Corky. And he gets into real estate, which is a line of work that rewards a self-enterprising spirit and doesn't necessarily require thorough background checks either. And though, he's a little bit of a loose cannon at times, he makes friends, he does all right for himself. And by all accounts, Robert Boyd is a very well-adjusted guy. That is, until he and 3 buddies throw their friend Kyle a bachelor party in Las Vegas. And the debauchery starts off pretty tame. That is until a sex worker that they've hired as entertainment winds up dead by their hands, as does the hotel security guard who comes investigating a noise complaint. And with 2 dead bodies to dispose of, Robert Boyd channels his high school delinquency and comes through cool, calm, and collected, and the problem solver of the group, willing to write off the double homicide as just a bump in the road and move on with groomsman duties as if nothing happened. When an unwilling accomplice nervously asks him, "Jesus, have you done this before?" he gets a sudden flashback. This is a real line in the movie. He gets a sudden flashback to when his high school fling, Veronica Sawyer, asked him that very same question while fabricating the suicide of one Heather Chandler. And just like that act did a decade before, what transpires sparks Robert Boyd, or Jason Dean, to engage in more violent and destructive behavior that ultimately seals his fate, only this time for good.
And what film is
Do you guys
this?
know what I'm talking about? I am talking, of course, about Christian Slater's role in Peter Berg's very dark comedy from 1998, Very Bad Things.
Oh, never seen that.
Okay, I'm going to tell you guys right now, I wanted to like this movie.
Aww.
This movie is so depressing.
Oh,
I actually
sounds like it.
don't really like it. This is the closest thing I've seen to like a car crash on screen.
Oh.
You cannot look away from this movie. Once you start it, you have to know how this movie ends. But I can guarantee you that if you have any heart, you're going to feel pretty sad and gross at the end of this movie.
I was curious as to, since you said you've seen like every Christian Slater and Winona Ryder movie, I was curious how you were going to choose what to do for
there are a bunch
Universe.
of other ones I could have done, but that one just feels,
That one feels
so
like a very strong connection.
Oh man, there's literally a character goes, "Jesus, have you done this before?" And he also shies away from the answer. He doesn't really answer it.
Do you think maybe Peter Berg was going for a Heather's reference with that?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Interesting.
Do we have any final thoughts? Do we want to just wrap up our feelings on this?
Heather's, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what else there is to be said. I am just so thankful to finally be initiated. I know we need to wrap up. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Heather's musical, which I know nothing about.
I made a point not to see it when it
Okay.
came out because I had such a specific response to the original film.
Yeah.
That being said, I've seen about half of it on like a bootleg. And if you know that you're watching like a musical that's inspired by this, it's pretty fun.
Okay.
But it cannot be compared to watching
Yeah,
this
of
movie.
course.
Really can't. Yeah. So different.
Yeah. You know, we never mentioned one of the runners up for JD, the role, another very famous actor who came along a few years later prominently, Brad Pitt.
So
Yeah.
he wasn't really
runner up.
It was like
runner-up.
a screen test.
Yeah.
Not even a screen test. It
He
was like a
auditioned.
table read.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a table read. Yeah, because apparently, the script was really hot. People really liked this script. And yeah, they were like, it reads great on the page, but isn't going to sound good.
Yeah.
And the guy who they got to read was Brad Pitt, probably about 2 or 3 years before his whole career blew up.
Yeah. 10 years later, though, he gets to be Tyler Durden.
That's true. That's true.
So it took him 10 years to warm up to that role, I guess.
And he also gets to be in a movie with Christian Slater in True Romance.
That's true.
Yeah, which is kind of fun. Yeah.
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 And yeah, I don't know what else to say.
In trying to surmise my thoughts on this, I went back to something I do a lot, which is I go to Roger Ebert reviews.
Yeah.
And sometimes he is so on point. Sometimes he's pretty off the mark. He gave Heathers 2.5 stars.
Okay.
Out of 4.
Out of 4, which is, I liked it, but with many reservations.
Yeah.
That's typically how Roger Ebert works. In this 2.5 out of 4-star review, he starts by saying this is the very first words. He says, I approach Heathers as a traveler in an unknown country, one who does not speak the language or know the customs and can judge the natives only by taking them at their word. Which I thought was kind of funny. Like he immediately is saying, like, he's like, I don't know if this movie is necessarily for me. But then he goes on to quote the director, who I think gave this response, or this was a response from like a press interview question, which is Michael Lehman says, he's like, teenagers don't have any trouble with it. It's always the adults who are shocked. And Ebert, in very typical fashion, pushed back a little bit. And I love this. He says, well, adulthood can be defined as the process of learning to be shocked by things that do not shock teenagers. So he pushed back a little bit on that. But what was very telling was how he ends his review. He says, is it a black comedy about murder or just a cynical morality play? The traveler in the foreign country is not sure, but he knows the film inspires thought and has the ability to shock, 2 qualities that make it worth considering. Maybe it's true that teenagers will understand it best. Maybe it's even true that they deserve to. And I bring this up because a few nights ago, I told my wife that spending the last 10 years or so back in this headspace, seeing this movie again after many years, honestly reminded me of those teenage years during which I fell so hard for this movie. It was a simpler time in my life. I had my whole life ahead of me, and I was very excited by that. The thrill of discovering something new, the creation of your self-identity that feels both in and completely out of your control. The belief that anything and everything was possible, all those feelings that you feel when you're like excited about life. Heathers still feels so inextricably tied to those feelings for me. That's the only way I can say it. This movie's been in my life for 20 years now. In fact, we're recording this about 5 days after this movie was released 35 years ago on the dot, March 31st, 1989. I can say that this is no longer my favorite movie or the best movie I've seen, though please don't ask me what those are. My love for Heathers might have peaked in high school, but I'm really glad that this movie, I think, has the trajectory much like that of The Unpopular Kids, and that it's kind of a late bloomer. It found and continues to grow a very passionate audience in the years after its release. There had been many movies, other movies that I'd seen before Heathers that I felt really strongly about. There, have been others since, and I know that there are going to be others in the future, but there will never be another movie like this one in my life. I couldn't possibly recreate the conditions that made this movie so special to me. It makes me simultaneously sad that I'll never fall so hard in love with a movie again quite like this, but also very grateful that I know what it feels like to experience that kind of unhinged love for a film, to feel like a work of art just spoke so clearly to my sensibilities and also helped shape them for the years to come. I love this movie too, and I'm pretty sure I always will.
Wow.
Yeah.
Slow clap.
That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, I feel like I can't follow that.
It's okay. This movie is just so very, very personally tied to the love of movies for me.
Well, I have one thing I can say to that. Okay, Sarah. And maybe
Whatever
that's
shall be.
maybe that's a good way
That's
to
the segue.
That's the
segue
segue.
into what we are covering next in this cycle of high school movies for our two-shot segment. And this is going to be with a pair of movies that I imagine many of you listeners have probably thought of yourselves, and that is Superbad and Booksmart. Two movies, both about that last day of school, that urge to fit in one climactic party before it's all over. On opposite sides of a gender divide, and made in different time periods, starring two siblings, though.
Yeah.
Jonah Hill and
That's
Beanie
true.
Feldstein. There's a lot of other details that we are going to get into about those two movies next time. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, me too.
Very much so.
You can follow us on TikTok at Sleepless Cinematic Pod and also on Instagram at Sleepless Cinematic Pod. You can email us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. You can follow me on Letterboxd at Patroness of Cats.
Or me at Julian_Barthold.
Wonderful. Guys, thank you so much.
Of
You've
course.
really thrown me a massive bone here on this
This
one.
has been wonderful. Well, great pate. But, well, Emilio, you better motor if you want to catch that bus back to New Jersey.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, thanks again. Thank you so much.